welcome everybody. We're just waiting on a few people to connect and we'll get started in a moment. Okay, awesome. We are recording today's session, so we might get into it. Stay on time because we know everybody out there everyone out there is, I'm sure, busy enough. So I'm going to kick things off today, and I just wanted to say welcome to everybody that's coming in and joining us today. Welcome to the Hayylo Insights webinar series. Yes, good afternoon, Sharon. Nice to see you. I'm Simon Haysman. I'll be your host for the Hayylo webinar series. Again, look, thank you all so much for joining to what I think is going to be a great conversation. Today's title is Wellbeing, the Pathway to Thriving in 2021. So I thought we'd just kick things off by setting the scene today and introducing you to the amazing panel that we've brought together. But a little bit of a lead in to the conversation. I think, as you know, we all know the post-pandemic normalisation happening across community services. It's something that's well underway, the shift that we've seen. And really with the upcoming Royal Commission report that will be delivered to the sector shortly, you know, there's a lot of chatter around the sector at the moment around what's really going to happen post the Royal Commission and what this concept that's being floated at the moment around wellbeing really means. So today I'm very, very excited to introduce you to our panel of experts and discuss what operationalising wellbeing looks like and how really providers and the general community can benefit from the changes that we're seeing, you know, across the sector and really across the world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the panel. We have Jamie Fillingham today, who is the Executive Director of Care at Goodwin. Goodwin is a very, very innovative aged care provider out of the ACT that we've had the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years at Hayylo. I'm joined by Greg Satter, CEO and co-founder. He's our head technologist and our thought leader here at Hayylo. So really excited to hear from him today. Of course, Meg Braithwaite, who's Hayylo's Director of Strategic Accounts and Growth. Meg's 15 years experience in the sector means she has an amazing pulse really of what's happening around operationalization of technology and some of the kind of core things that we'll be talking to today. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Si.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. There we go. There you all are. Awesome. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll have a little bit of Q&A at the end, and we'll try and follow up with you all around the questions that come through if we don't get to them. We are recording today's session, so we'll be able to share that out to the wider community a little bit later. And again, thank you so much for joining us. But let's get into it, guys, because this is a great topic and something I'm really, really excited to kind of dig into with you all. As we said, look, it's well established that the 2020 pandemic has really caused what you could only say are massive shifts and big changes across the sector. And it's really behind, you know, what we're seeing as, you know, you would call it a mindset shift that's happened over the last kind of 12 months. And I think that's where I'd like to start. And I was just wondering, as we go around the panel, you know, what you think some of the key changes were for the sector since the pandemic began. And I might throw to you, Greg, to get your perspective of the shift that we're seeing across the world.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks for having me on this, Simon. You know what? I thought about this and I summed it up into a word. And it's a word that is close to my heart at the moment and is close to the decision-making criteria that we have at Hayylo. Uncertainty, right? So expect the unexpected. That's came out the end of last year with mass uncertainty. Things were changing continuously. And, you know, when we had our team meeting at the beginning of the year, when we're establishing what we're doing for the year, what can we bank on? Uncertainty for now. And that's enough. So with all the uncertainty that happened, I think when I reflected on last year, working internally and amongst ourselves and with our customers, business continuity planning was a very key topic. How do we keep delivering services? How do we keep all of our businesses moving where there is all of this significant uncertainty? And a key thing that we saw was the reliance on communication, the ability to disseminate information, the ability to get it out there and reach the people that need it. internally within Hayylo, that's our team members that are across multiple states around the rules and regulations for our customers and teams and communities. It's getting that message out. And the key takeaway for me is that there's been a huge rise in acceptance around the various ways in which you can communicate and the various ways in which people pulled information to them. And setting the stage, this actually presents all of us with some really unique opportunities. So in my mind, I saw lots of business continuity planning and execution, which is being prepared for the unexpected, and the reliance on communication and it becoming the new norm and infrastructure level type stuff in our sector.
Yeah, that's great, Greg. It's really interesting, and I'd love to hear from Meg around what she's seen across the sector as she speaks to providers and leaders across community services.
Yeah, so really much like what Greg was saying, disruption is now the new normal, really. And I think really what I saw across the sector was how surprised they were internally around how well they rose to that challenge. Communication, as you say, was key. It's absolutely key. And it was not something that would have been necessarily front and center pre-COVID. It orbited around a certain importance, but it wasn't front and center. Now, of course, it was absolutely front and center, along with infection control. So there was this ability to have to communicate and find different mechanisms to communicate, interweave that into the day-to-day, in amongst the shock and awe, as we say, of what the pandemic was doing in a day-to-day. I saw both the good, the management of it, and the bad. But that was a fairly straight message across the providers that I saw. Disruption and communication, absolutely. On a personal note, I had my own wellbeing moment, really around how I needed to, what was meaningful for me. And I think that itself, both at a staff and a client level, that really bubbled to the surface around what is actually important day to day, what provides me meaning, and how do I articulate that in a day to day, fashion. So they're all connected, they all orbit around each other, but it is for that very reason such an interesting topic, this concept of well-being, because you think it would be flaky, in its concept, but actually there's so much to it to unpack. So I think, I'm interested to get into this with you all.
Yeah, I love that, Meg, and it's something that I think we'll kind of dig into next, because that shift is something that we're definitely seeing, and understanding what that means is obviously very important to the people here today. But Jamie, I'd love to get your point of view. Are those things resonating with you as a provider? Are you seeing other things? What's happening in your world?
100%. Everything resonates what's just been said. I think one of the biggest things which has made me really proud to be part of this sector is just to see how resilient we are in this sector, and how different stages, different states have gone through different variations of the pandemic and have come out the other end stronger, supported, and we're all in it together. So I think resilience has been amazing throughout the whole of this COVID pandemic. But also, and again, communication, the strengthening of the communication that we're required within our businesses to be able to keep up with the constant changes, making sure that our residents, clients, our employees, everybody is well equipped and well versed with what is required of them for all these unknown variances which come our way. So.
Yeah, awesome. And look, Jamie, if you could, and I don't want you to give away all the secret sauce, but how did Goodwin respond? What were the kind of tactical things that you've done as an organisation as the COVID crisis hit and ongoing?
Yep. So we started back in January last year, when we started to hear the rumblings which were coming through from over in Wuhan. So we started doing a lot of that stockpiling of all of our PPE and stocks, which we knew that we'd need. But then that then filtered into setting up a task force, which started in around February time. That task force consisted of key executives from around the business. So at Goodwin, we have home care, residential care, and retirement living. So it was important that we had our COVID task force, which went across all of our business units, and it had expertise from all of our business units. So this task force met on a daily basis, and it was to ensure that we was keeping one up to date with the information which was coming through, because there was a lot of confusion. One, the confusion which was all over social media and the way that social media portrayed the COVID-19 outbreak. And then also we wanted to try and condense down the volume of information which everybody was listening to, so that we was the one source of truth. And so this was then discussed through the COVID task force, and ensuring that the right messaging was going out on a daily basis to our residents, clients, and our employees. That then, so COVID task force became the norm on a daily basis. We separated out our businesses with a team A, team B, across all of our business units. When you've got an employee base of over 550 employees just in Canberra, that was a logistical challenge as well, but it was something which operated really well. We focused a lot on internal communications, but also all of our external communications, setting up COVID hotlines, setting up COVID-specific email addresses, over communicating out towards all of our residents, clients, and the families of. Then all the training which went along with all of our infection control practices, making sure that all of our teams were well versed in all of the donning, doffing practices of PPE, making sure that we had the ability within our facilities to cohort, making sure that within our home care businesses, we had the right screening mechanisms in place. It was an hour-long meeting from a task force, which then filled the day, and it was an ongoing daily basis, which was changing daily. So it was so important to keep up with all of the communications. So as an operator, as a provider of care services, it was challenging, but it was also well coordinated. And having a really strong clinical oversight and taking guidance from Department of Health, our public health units, on how to operate, we was well versed in, and we were successful. And touch wood, we've still been successful to this day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there really is, for all the challenge, so much. There is such a silver lining to, I think, what's happening at the moment. And as you said earlier, Jamie, watching the sector respond is just, it kind of puts your hand to your heart a little bit around the sector that we work in, and seeing the work that's happening collectively is really amazing. Greg or Meg, anything to kind of extend on that before we move into the next section?
No, I just listening to you, Jamie, I think, and we were working with lots of groups that were in very similar situations. We were all thrown this massive challenge, and it's the way in which we're able to respond. And now my thoughts just go towards, what does this future bar that's been set mean for us? What do we do with these realizations of the power of sharing information and empowering our teams? What does that mean as we move forward, and can we leverage that momentum? Because information is so key and so powerful, and we're in a lot of ways, a lot of us are bound by the worlds in which we work in, the inability to get it out of all the different places that it exists easy to allow a single view for our people, our internal teams to start with. So it just made me think of all that work that your teams were doing, which is amazing. And then what it means now for us as we move forward. That's a really interesting concept that I'm anchoring on at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I think that is great, Greg, because it will lead into one of the upcoming sections. But before we go out, I thought we'd take an opportunity to go in quickly and just, discuss this word, well-being. I think there is really no consensus, other than the definition around, that single definition of well-being. But there's definitely an agreement, that at a minimum it is about, really well-being includes the presence of positive emotions. It's about engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishments, these very kind of emotionally driven kinds of things that we have. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to take a step back quickly and set up this next section around how you all think about well-being, either on a personal, professional, or Jamie as a provider. And I might get Megan to kick off this section. Megan, how do you look at well-being?
Yeah, well, and I know it's serious when you're calling me Megan, Simon, but so let me be serious face on.
Sorry.
Look, I tend to have a take of well-being and I draw a natural line to meaning. So how you define meaning in your life. And this is not necessarily a sideline study of mine, but there are things around it that, very much interest me around how you center yourself or what sustains you in your day-to-day around, how you feel, and there is that there is a heightened sensitivity to that as you age, right, as well. So this lens that we have in our domain, when we look at the well-being through the lens of our sector, it paints on a few different things. And so things that I have a luxury over around control and independence and choice and all the things that are of an expectation of mine that I have in my day-to-day, even pre-pandemic, the people we were providing care for that were under the auspices of our care were already living a sense of isolation. They were already living in this somewhat limited, service system that was very much bound by, the imagination of our time then, and we have this moment of really co-designing something that allows us to focus on that a lot more. And that's where the meaning of well-being to me goes to that meaning of meaningfulness. So not necessarily happiness or contentment, because those are, again, fairly transient, things. No one's happy all of the time. Well, and if they are, it's usually medicated. But it's, there are some other things that hold us up around that. And funnily enough, and I will link this back. So our beautiful marketing person is going to provide links that I refer to. But there's this wonderful TED talk that I will link you all to. That actually is a professor who's done all of this study around this, and this is where I draw it back to well-being. So bear with me here, but there's this concept of the 4 pillars of meaning in life, and there are things around storytelling and transcendence and purpose and belonging, and all of those things have counterweights to how we are socially connected, how we are empowered. How we're included in our society in this expectation, that we set. And the pandemic put us into this socially isolated state. So, they're already isolated, and then this became even more so. And we draw parallel lines between, that and, well, how do they connect? Where we expect everybody to be accessing things and deriving their control and independence and knowledge through online content right now, because we all have to socially isolate. But what if you don't have access to those things? And how are you maintaining that level of communication? And so we know through varying studies and research, which again I will reference and support through this bibliography that we share, that there is a straight line between meaning in your life and how that's been supported, and your well-being. And that well-being has a whole range of things: your physical well-being, because it can impact that, your mental well-being, and your overall ability to feel like you're being well cared for. you know, if you've got, as a service provider, you've taken the ownership of that you've got that duty of care, then really that falls on us to have those conversations that empower. What does that mean? So to me, I'm sorry for always a long response from me, but I do draw that direct correlation between well-being and meaning in life, and that's a big topic in itself. But you know, we're at a point where we have to start facilitating those conversations so that we can empower our support staff to serve those things with our clients. So
yeah, I love that, Meg. And, you know, just a reflection from myself, who's someone that is very digitally connected, maybe a little bit too much at times, you know, when that connection, when that community, it was taken away, and when we were in lockdown and through the isolation, how much, as you were saying, I became aware of the lack of community, the lack of connection, but then how much that actually had an effect on obviously the mental health, but then my physical health, and how that trinity really works and it all interplays and connects. So I just love that insight that you're sharing. Greg, I'll throw to you, your thoughts around wellbeing.
Yeah, the first thing I was thinking of is, and I'll reflect on a small story towards the end of last year, but at the end of last year, I looked inwards a lot, right? Like probably a lot of us. And look, I come from software, so my response is going to be somewhat methodical, yet not, it's still going to be, I'll try and make it very interesting. The first point is wellbeing is subjective. What's for you may not be for someone else. And this presents all of us with challenges. And this is something that probably going to need to think about and workshop and have these kind of conversations and about as we move forward. But you know, in my mind, it was actually in November last year, I needed to break it down in my own mind to work out what were the building blocks that made this up for me. It's the only way I could understand it and try and measure it, and then encapsulate it into something that I was able to take action on. So for me, you know, I anchored on a lot of the things that Meg was just talking about. It's, do I have a sense of belonging to the community? You know, am I making some kind of contribution? We all value that. Do I have positive emotions? Am I, you know, compassion, joy? They're all positive emotions. And the other one that we're all talking about, the other one that we're talking about, which is connection, but I thought about it a little bit further. And what I was thinking is, do I feel connected to something larger than myself? And, you know, this is going into the spiritual side of it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I found that to be a really key moment for me last year. I'm a ones and zeros type of person, right? Facts and data, but being connected to something and recognizing that I was actually part of something larger than me, whatever that was and whatever it is for the individual. That was a big defining moment for me in my household last year. And it was actually a moment where we moved through something. It was either that being a mental barrier that for some reason still ensures that I don't leave the house all that often. Well, whatever that is, you see that the impacts are actually lasting and they take a while to get out of. But I really thought about wellbeing and I realized it's different for everyone. And that's something that I really want to focus on with all of with the sector as we move forward.
Yeah, I love that. I think we could probably talk about this one topic, excuse me, all day. You know, and I even know, Greg, you know, for myself, as I went through that kind of self-reflection at the end of the year around the importance, you know, I started to realize myself that, that subjective wellness is subjective, but it's also changing, you know, and there's a connection between well-being and values, you know, our value alignment, and those values shift and change and reprioritize depending on maybe what we're lacking or what we don't have. And you have to constantly redesign, you know, that value alignment so you can access what well-being means to you at that point. So subjective, sure, and ever changing. And I just think it's an amazing opportunity that we have at the moment to dig into this side. And as again, how that affects, you know, the physical self as well. Jamie, yourself or on a provider sense, how are you guys looking at it?
Yeah, look, from a personal perspective, I think wellbeing's, it's a word which has been around for a long time. If you think back to the 60s, it was very much the flower power in thing to be talking about, but now it's become more of a factual, real, everybody understands what wellbeing means. real to people. From my perspective, I feel that having good well-being for me is in the format of two things: physical and mental. From a mental perspective, I need to ensure that one, in my working world, but also in my personal world, I've got the right balance in there, that I'm grounded to be able to deal with any of the stresses which fly at you. And we're living in a world which has just got so much stress attached to it, and it's how you deal with that stress and have that resilience and calm to be able to walk through the big journey that we're on, whatever that may be. And then the physical. Without the physical, you can't have the mental. So you need to have, for me, it's really important that I am keeping my body fit. I am trying to maintain a good, healthy eating regime. So I think it all ties in itself. But what was really interesting, just going back to your comment, Greg, about being very individual, I held a bit of a session yesterday with a couple of my teams, and I threw in the question of what does well-being mean to you, just so I could test for this session. And out of 8 people around the table, everybody had their own individual perspective of what well-being meant. So it is a unique thing, but I think everybody came back to a connection response. And so to be connected, to be able to make sure that we've got the ability to maintain relationships and have, whether that's an internal connection or that's an external connection with others. So
Si, before you cross over, I thought I would add in just on that, Jamie. I just can relate because I happened to watch Simon on his own LinkedIn feed today. Posted his work in how he starts his well-being, on a daily basis, and this from a subjective layer, just to let you know. So from a difference, I watched this and I humbly enjoyed it. So I bet it is so different from my world that I just had to just burst out laughing. So Simon's well-being methodology on a day is having some magic water drink, vitamin drink, I think doing some lovely stretching and yoga, going for a nice casual walk around the block to clear his head, and all I can tell you is that my hours between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. with 3 small children are basically the antithesis of that. Like it is the polar opposite. My concept of well-being is I'm lucky enough to get a cup of coffee made by my 12-year-old, and I count myself reaching a goal by that measure. So that's just, it really is. I don't think we can ever get away from the fact that it is always going to be different for every, but that's the beauty of it, right? How we harvest that knowledge around what is important to each individual and how we serve that and meet that in their care. That's really where I think we're all getting, and that's the whole point. That's really where we're getting to at an operational layer around how we make that real and front and center for everybody as they walk in that front door in a community care or open the residence door. Their well-being looks very different to everybody else, and it's having that innate knowledge that's very key.
Yeah, so that's great, Meg. And yes, that makes complete sense. Upon reflection, I live by myself, so my challenges are a little bit different to yours and everybody else's, as you're saying. And I think as you were kind of leading to at the end there around that operization of well-being, kind of brings us to that next section. We know that with the Royal Commission, there's a big indication around this word that we're talking about today, well-being. And it will have a bigger importance, around how we capture and even, for providers, prove that we are actually providing it to clients and to the workforce. And it's going to be a challenge to be able to evidence that. So, I was interested to understand from each of you, how do we operationalize this? How do we get a little bit more tactful? What are the blockers, opportunities, insights? Jamie, I might get you to kick off.
Yep. Look, I think from a home care perspective, it's really important that we're looking at everybody completely 100% individually who we're going to see. We can't follow the same model for everybody because it will never be. And this is what is so great about consumer-directed care, is that you can build and get to really understand who your clients are on that real personal level. So I think connection, one, and the connection and communication are really key in the success of operationalising wellbeing within a home care environment. From a connection perspective, by reducing the geographical areas of how many clients we're seeing from a smaller pool of workers, to truly understand who our clients are that we're delivering care to. So a real understanding of knowing them to the real depth of detail. And I think I've always given the example of what I would love from our carers is for them to go into Jamie's house and know that he doesn't take sugar in his coffee and he will only have lactose-free milk, please. It's just knowing that depth of detail, which is really important, but then also reducing the stresses of large volumes of people entering into the client's world. It all will have a big impact on their well-being because it's a very personal approach, as we know, receiving services from an external person. And I think from a perspective of what are the opportunities, definitely having more ability to have communication with our clients, but it doesn't always have to be face-to-face. We're seeing larger groups of clients who are adapting to the use of technology to be able to support their well-being. And we've proven this already in the programs which I've run, where we've used technology as a provider to support people on a connected basis. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be tactile. It can always be a digital platform as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great. Sorry, Greg, I was going to throw to you anyway. So perfect.
Perfect. I was just thinking about something then, Jamie, and you were talking about making it personal, more personal. The challenge would then be, how do you do that at scale effectively with it at a business level? Is there anything that you can share around some key things that you guys have done in that sense to make that materialize and make it have good business sense as well?
Yep. Campaigns. Last year we ran a very successful, not last year, the year before, which has now become BAU, a really successful campaign of knowing who our clients are. And it was a Know Your Customer campaign. And so it went through the full admission process, but really understanding the stories of who we are providing the care to. So that went across all of our home care package programs, and we've started now to feed that into our Commonwealth Home Support program, because we know that they're going to be a really strong feeder into our home care package, and they're going to be in the care world for a long period of time. So it makes sense for us to really truly understand who they are, even if they just have their cleaning done once a fortnight. It's crucially important. So on a larger scale, it can be done by, again, as I said, the condensing down of the volume of carers going in, having a really strong coordination and case management layer over the top, so ensure that the client who receives the care has got the right people going in at the right time, at the right place, with the right skills going through.
Great. I love that. It's like saying we have this one of the many mantras in Hayylo is, once and done. Let's minimize rework. It is almost at the cornerstone of absolutely everything that we do. And because we see rework happening almost everywhere. And it's that moment where you say, you know what? Let's capture this information. Let's expose that information. Let's share that so that it's available to people, so they get the story, they get that personal story, and they can adjust it ongoing. Yeah, I love that. And, Simon, just thinking about this particular topic, which is, how do we operationalize it? What are some of the challenges and the opportunities? The opportunities are massive. The opportunities to create, there's lots of talk about hyper-personalization. Technology is going to be a driver. Operational change needs to go along with that. But hyper-personalization, when we think about healthcare, is almost fundamental to everything. Medicines will be hyper-personalized at some stage in the future, but we'll save that for another conversation. There are some challenges, right? Definitely. One of the key challenges we talked about before is it's subjective, right? So that lends into the hyper-personalization aspect. But one of the things that I did in my own home was, and you can all think about, you'll think about what's happening in Casa de Sator as a result of this. I implemented a measurement system for myself so I could track, all the different variables that were constituted my own well-being. So measurement's going to be required, and that's also going to be a challenge for us. So, frameworks, standards, thinking about that in a way that allows us to pull out all of those things that we were just talking about previously. But I look at the best thing we've got in our advantage is that the key to all of this is listening and opening different ways to listen and making sure we're actively listening to our teams, listening to our customers. That will feed in. You can't measure without listening. So I see that as a fundamental layer beneath all of that our ability to listen better to our customers and communities.
Awesome. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And Megan?
Yeah, just before you cross over, Si, because really what Jamie was outlining there is that, there's the holy grail within community care is continuity of care. And, at an achievement level, they've done just so exceptionally well at executing on that, which is, just as everyone who's a participant on here would rightly know, is actually incredibly hard. And the continuity of care is innately linked, we know, to the well-being of clients, but also the well-being of staff. So, there's a direct parallel line between churn of staff and the continuity of care. In fact, when they, again, some research I was across or listening into from some very other smart people were that, on analysis of why staff leave, and I think this is key to Goodwin, is that they obviously don't have a lot of staff leave, but why staff leave is not literally linked to, not always at least, one of the key contenders is not pay, which you would naturally think of. Actually, it's about that lack of continuity with the same clients and the inability to form those close relationships with clients that are under their care. And we know that when that occurs, they have greater well-being and sense of fulfillment and sense of self and meaning in their lives, but so do the clients, and enablement of that continuity of care has, so many connotations, both at a financial level, because, staff turnover is hugely costly, but it also may very well lead to client turnover as well, because who wants a stranger in their house every second day? So that the surfacing and the ability to operationalize at that, I'm a nurse, so I want to always say at the assessment layer, but how we get to know our clients and the mechanisms that we use in order to facilitate that knowledge and transfer that out, as you say, at scale, Greg, is really quite at the cornerstone of that. And so that's obviously something Goodwin have been, very great at doing and surfacing up as being very important. But, really what they're seeing the benefit of is that continuity of care is actually attracting that greater well-being, just by the very nature of what it is and what it does, so there's so much to take away from all of that. I just think it's marvelous, Jamie. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great, guys. It's, again, just such an interesting subject, and I think it's we are really touching on some of the positive outcomes, I think, as we went into the challenges there and some of the more tactical elements to operationalise wellbeing as we've been talking through. And I think it's also clear that, what's come out of today is that, we all as a community and therefore providers, have to do more to nurture connection. I think it's been put in our faces a little bit over last year. And, where we can enable that through more efficient communication, and that helps us achieve, physical, social, mental well-being. Are there any other kind of final insights or call them outcomes that you've seen from your prospective worlds, around the positive influence that this has for the provider or for the community? We might start on this one with Greg.
I just, in summary, and I'm looking at time as well. Again, going back into who Greg is and how he thinks, I boil things down to the essence, and I try and work backwards from there. And that allows you to problem solve at a deeper level. So as we're throwing challenges and looking at wellbeing, think about what we do internally is we boil them down to the core, and then we elevate from there. And key to all of that is, number one, is listening more, opening up different channels to listen. This is super critical. We've done it at Hayylo all across last year, and we'll continue to do it more. The more ways in which we can listen in a structured way allows us to steer, allows us to make collective decisions as a group. And then that will steer us towards outcomes. So, opening up, sharing more with your teams, with your customers, in ways that make them feel comfortable, in ways in which they can listen and access, is super key. So as we move into this wellbeing, into the world of wellbeing, and we're all focusing inwards on that as individuals as well. I look at my big takeaway was listen, spend more time and open different ways to listen. And we do that well, magic happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Greg. Maybe Jamie, any kind of final thoughts, positive from outcomes?
Yeah, look, I think my messaging throughout this discussion is really the strength of communication, and how important and crucial it is that if we don't get it right, and we're not always going to get it right, but if we don't get it right and bring people on the journey, then it's going to make life so much more difficult. One of the successes that we've had is every 2 months we hold a Zoom meeting for our community clients and their families, just so that we can keep them up to date with where we're at as an organisation in our preparedness, ongoing, if there's any updates. We've just done one giving them an update of planning for COVID vaccine, even though it's all a bit uncertain at present, but it's just giving information that they'll be seeking. So yeah, my take home for everyone is the strength in communication.
Amazing. And Meg, before we get into a few questions that we've got, any final thoughts for us?
Look, I think all being very well covered. I just love how we've, really been able to get down to that, that, as you say, distill the essence of this, Greg. And really, I think my takeaway is that if social connection is really, to use a metaphor, the highway to well-being, then communication is the vehicle that gets us there, right? It's really, Jamie, what you're doing there from that bringing in and the storytelling that you then interplay with those that are in your care and their extended care network, that's really the key to this. And, technology and what we do is an enabler of that. And that is also equally key, and how we facilitate the adoption of that, how we empower people to take that on their journey, bring them in. We know it has all of those fabulous health, outcomes from a, reduction in depression and anxiety, but also, as we say, very physical outcomes that we know are linked to things like a greater reduction in coronary heart disease and cognitive disorders and all sorts of other things. So we have the building blocks and we have the recipe. We know what we need to do. I think my takeaway really is that we've kind of set ourselves a challenge because we know enough now, and we really need to be executing on it. Now, there's enough talk. We need to actually get some things underway. So I like a bit of doing, and there's a bit of fulfilling. I think there's some very fulfilling goals that we can be achieving, over the space of 2021, where we can use, all that pain and hurt of 2020 and channel that into some very great outcomes, for both us, in this industry, but our clients as well.
Amazing, guys. Look, we're nearly at time. I'm going to fire off 2 quick questions that we've got from the audience here. can circle back on some other things that have come through. This one's for Jamie. A question from Murat. Are there challenges around evaluating the well-being of the residents in care? So,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think what we've been doing from an evaluation perspective is just having conversations with them, keeping regular contact with them. We did some surveying of our resident base, and that's an ongoing monthly thing. But it's also we did some really strong surveying about how they felt throughout the pandemic of last year, and getting an understanding from them as what they're expecting from a provider. Overall feedback was they love the strength in communication yet again. They love the fact that they had close contact with us, whether that was either through the Hayylo platform, keeping them updated, but then also through us making constant contact with them on an almost daily basis. So it's making sure that our clients have got the trust, understanding that we're there for them, and whatever it is that they require, we'll try and work with them to get the best outcomes for their well-being.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really interesting. And then one final question, and I'll just do a quick wrap up, and everyone can get on to the rest of their days. Daniel asked a really interesting question around the fact that the IITC have highlighted where technology could be used to provide better outcomes for residents and staff. And the question was, how have you seen technology add value to people's health? I thought this could be a cool question to just go around the room quickly as a final point. And maybe Jamie, if you wanted to kick things off, if you've got a thought on it.
Yeah, look, I've been really interested in the use of technology in health. My background, I am a registered nurse, and so clinical health outcomes is really important to me, and what we can do to get good outcomes for people living in a home care setting by the use of technology. So using platforms such as telehealth, I've seen varying degrees of success with them. I think it's constant education, making sure that they've got buy-in, but also making sure that the data that we're receiving from it, they're actually doing something tangible with the data, and that they're understanding the data. So, yeah, there's definitely a place for it, but it's how you work with your client group to ensure that they're getting the best out of it, and it's just another thing which is going to sit on the shelf.
That's great, Jamie. That links me to a future webinar that we have coming up around actually how you do that. So very timely. Meg, yourself.
From the reality sense of how I've seen it add value is actually, almost in an everyday state, how it reduces anxiety for the most part. So there would be others, of course, but that tends to be a bit of a core message that we hear from our customer base, is that the ability for them to interact with services that are being provided, but it's a constantly changing thing, both within community care and residential aged care. So that feeling of being in touch with the mechanisms around what's going on that sort of swirl around them, just it's simple stuff, being able to just see their schedule so that they can plan their day, being able to know who's coming and know that it's Jane and not, Joan, that, they can see their care plan, that, there are things that it's just empowerment of knowledge, things, again, that we as, adults within this world just take for granted. That is often not in place for them. And so having that immediate access in so that they can interact with that absolutely reduces anxiety. And we know that, along with, we know from studies as well that there is a direct line correlation between how socially connected and the relationships that people form links to their greater, longevity and health outcomes and so on. It's again something that I'll link you all into a 75 study that was done. That's pretty remarkable, but that draws those correlations to those health outcomes, so it's really interesting reading. I would really recommend listening to it and reading the background research around what went into that. But look, that it's really around that social fabric, and how connected people feel. That has weight in a health outcomes layer. And I think that acknowledgement of that, as we have as health professionals, and how much we put that front and center, it's just as equally important as the health outcomes from a comorbidity sense. Because we talk a lot about customer focus, but this is really living it, right? Now, our health system is very much being built around this model of disease-centered, not customer-centered. And so this is the framework that we get to co-design and change, through, the disruption of what we've just all been through. Interesting, but yeah.
Meg, I nearly went on a tangent then. I love that subject, and I want to keep digging into this, but we will keep moving. Greg, any final thoughts from yourself?
Just on that specific question around technology and adding value to people's health. All I will say, I'll just summarize what I heard Jamie and Meg, what you guys said, is awareness drives empowerment, which drives behavior, right? So when we become aware of things, it allows us to be empowered to make decisions, right? And that's our behavior as an offset of that. So our mandates and internally within Hayylo is to make sure everyone's aware of what's happening, because I said it before, but beautiful things happen when people are aware of what's happening. And it seems so simple, but we often have a tendency to silo it, to contain it, for various reasons. Operating and working out how you can be more open safely is a great thing, and has great results, and the net impact is behavior shift. So yeah, I'm really focusing on that.
Amazing. What a fantastic way to finish today, and what an awesome conversation. I love that this is coming to the forefront, and that we all get to connect and share the insights and some value, hopefully, to the people that joined us today. So thank you to everybody that came along. You'll be able to access the content post the webinar. We'll get moving on getting that out to everybody. Also wanted to quickly announce we have our next webinar booked in, I'm told, March 18th, with Ilse Hampton from Meaningful Aging Australia. We're going to extend on this conversation, go a little bit deeper, have some more tactical insights and information that everyone can pull out of the webinar to go back to their worlds. And look, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to connect, even though it's virtually, but this is the world we're in today. So stay safe out there, and thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.